Hello, everyone. Welcome to the discussion on the Bauhaus of Circularity, a session framed under the new European Bauhaus movement, which, as we well know, it's at full speed and proposes a groundbreaking approach to the way Europe lives, spaces, and communities. As the EU calls on all citizens to be part of the initiative, at INL we are committed to setting up a cross-sectoral task force that contributes to the NAB and helps shape in a sustainable and inclusive way the future of circularity. So as a recent official partner of the new European Bauhaus, we are honored to kickstart these efforts with an online session focused on two main themes, and these are the materials and design for circularity and energy for circularity. So without further ado, I welcome Lars Montelius, the Director General of INL, to initiate the discussion.
Thank you very much. So I would like to wish all of you very, very much welcome to this Bauhaus of Circularity initiative today. And as was presented by Ines before, I mean, we at INL are taking this very seriously. So we believe that the Bauhaus initiative as such is one of the very most important instruments that can happen now in the European Green Deal transition period. And it's very important that we engage. And this is all about engagement, and it's engagement about citizens. It's engagement of us. So INL is working, as you know, it's an intergovernmental research organization, and we're headquartered here in Portugal and Braga, and we're working to really for the mission of making life much better, the possibility to breathe more clean air as well as drink more clean water, as well as behave much better. So we're here for the societal challenges of today. And one of the biggest challenges is, of course, the climate change that we are facing. And the Bauhaus Circularity, Bauhaus Initiative, it really brings all the possibilities to engage citizens. And I looked in the program, and it's a very interesting program for today. We're getting to hear about the initiative in itself, but also getting to parallel sessions. And in one of them, we are having ecological student that we worked with many years ago, 2015 already, when we did something here in the city of Braga, putting up in the city square a folly, which were looking like a spaceship. So people were very astonished about that. Said, "Whoa, what is this?" And then the next day, we put a cushion on it with living algae. And then during the next 3-4 months, it was there in the public space in Braga, and the sun shine its light onto it, and algae were produced, and people were experience it, moving around, looking on it. And in the end, I was very thrilled because one of the very senior people, usually, you know, in squares, a lot of senior people being gathering, and they kind of seeing a lot of things happening, and they're there, right, and having some time together with each other. And then one day when I passed by, I saw one of these guys, he was explaining about the folly, what it all was about, how the algae was kind of thriving there, what the carbon footprint, how many trees this kind of folly construction was doing the same thing for, etc. And that was for a group of tourists. So he was suddenly the tourist guide without any kind of formal connection, explaining everything to this audience. And I think this was an extremely good example of how bringing science to the city and to the citizens, and then to engage. And we had science cafes, etc., that we talked about why did we do this. We had school classes there, etc. So all these things, I think it kind of frames the necessity for, I would say, researchers to exercise the kind of scientific social responsibility to actually speak and talk. What do we experience? What do we think about the future? How will the future look like? And to get all citizens involved in this, because this is only by inclusiveness, by having everyone integrated, that we can move forward. And now we really need to move forward together in order to change or to handle the climate change, change that we're facing now. So with these words, I would like to just say welcome all again to all of you participating here, and your contribution to this event is extreme importance, and also the subsequent things happening as a consequence of this event. So with these words, I give back to you now, Ines.
Thank you, Professor Lars. But before we dig into the main topics of the session, we have the pleasure to have with us today the President of the Portuguese National Innovation Agency, Joana Mendonça. Joana will give us an overview of the BAUHAUS initiative and all the opportunities laying out there. Welcome, Joana.
Thank you, Ines. Thank you, first of all, Lars, for this kind invitation and for having me participate in this event. So it's actually the first time I have the chance to share and talk about the BAUHAUS initiative. As you probably know, we are here at the Innovation Agency. We are coordinating the participation in Portugal. As Lars said, and I think most importantly, this is a sort of a movement, an initiative that brings people together from different backgrounds, and that's actually in the center of the BAUHAUS movement and the new BAUHAUS, the new European BAUHAUS in this case. So the motto is actually that conversations will shape the future. And with this in mind, the first event, the first initiative of the new European BAUHAUS was actually a call for an expression of opinions in their website. It's still open. You can go and share your views if you go to the website. And this is a very open, engaging method. We are not particularly used to this method when it comes to European institutions, so I think this is really transformational in that sense. So I invite you all, you can actually after contribute with your ideas, and they are actually seen, and some of them are selected to be on the website. You can go and see. And actually this is what is in the background of this initiative. In a more concrete way, the new European BAUHAUS intends to design sustainable ways of living by joining different views from art and culture to science and technology, integrating every person and all parts of society, and to contribute to the Green Deal. So this is actually a new approach to the innovation in order to achieve the European goals together with that facilitate, that integrate the Green Deal. And it's, as the initiative suggests, an approach, as they say, to discover beautiful, sustainable and inclusive ways of living. And this is some sort of, it's an inspiration in itself. Now, I guess why are we talking today about this? Is actually, this is an opportunity to work and in interaction with different fields. So the goal is to bridge the worlds of science and technology with the world of art and culture. This in itself is, of course, a challenge, because what we have understood here at the Innovation Agency is that the languages are different. So we have a common goal, and not just the common goal as a society, but the goal to actually make citizens take ownership of the Green Deal and be a part of the solution with the specialists. And this is also, in its sense, a new way of thinking and a way of organizing. Just to tell you that, unlike other things, the new European BAUHAUS is actually an initiative. It's an initiative that is sort of brings together different mechanisms within the European incentive. So it shouldn't be seen as one source of incentive, because it's actually an umbrella movement that will cover different areas within the European programs. So it's not a program in itself, but more an umbrella to several programs. So that means that there will be in terms of opportunities, different funding opportunities or project opportunities in different parts of the European programs. Precisely because the goal again is to leverage creativity and innovation by different parts of society. So more specifically, the goals are to shape this movement in order to, of course, explore, and as Lars said, how to live better together, and together to make the Green Deal a tangible experience, not just for the people who are working in solutions and sustainable issues, but actually for all of us, for all people in Europe. And this connection of people from different disciplines and backgrounds is again on the basis of this movement. So this movement implies bringing people from different disciplines and backgrounds. About the initiative itself, as I mentioned, it is beyond buildings, including rural spaces, but also beyond the traditional mechanisms and ways of functioning of the European missions and initiatives, because it's an integrative challenge. It includes, of course, these different views, the beautiful, inclusive, and sustainable. So that means that it's a challenge that includes sustainability issues. Beautiful because the aesthetics and quality are a criteria, and inclusion that includes affordability and accessibility issues in the entire initiative. This intends to bring ideas out of the box and be transformative by promoting a culture of transformation in order to achieve these targets of sustainability, beauty, and inclusion in the European Union. In terms of organization, how this works within the European structure, it has been it's being led by the commissioners Maria Gabriel and Elisa Ferreira. You might know that. But as I mentioned, because it is a transversal initiative, it's actually being worked with different DGs and different cabinets within the European Commission. There is, of course, a core project team that is reporting directly to the president, and the competences are spread again with all the DGs. So this is also an unusual form of organizational structure, to address this more transversal view of the program, of the initiative. No, actually, becoming a partner, we already have different partners in Portugal, and actually there's a chance for people to become a partner, and they will facilitate the communication. And you can, if you wish to become a partner, you can actually go to the website of the European BAUHAUS and apply to become a partner. Now, in terms of how the new BAUHAUS initiative will work in terms of timeline, you might be aware that it started precisely in the last year, 2020, with this call for expression of manifestation of opinions, which is still running. And this was what was running in the first year, last year, and it is now the first year, and it is a phase that is called the design phase. This will last for a year, so until the October this year, after which we start with the delivery phase, and after the dissemination phase after that. So it's the 5-year program. So the design phase is the phase where we are, and the goal is actually to identify what is already being done and that the new BAUHAUS initiative can accelerate. and materialize, but it is already been taking place because, of course, many of existing initiatives in different European countries can already respond to this challenge of bringing together science and technology and arts and humanities to deliver and provide solutions in a sustainable, beautiful and inclusive way. And so the goal in this first phase was actually to identify some of these initiatives and understand if the new European BAUHAUS could actually accelerate and provide a framework for these ideas. For that, there will be a call for proposals where at least 5 places will be selected to materialize the new BAUHAUS concept. These are the so-called pilots. They will be distributed in different member states, but it hasn't opened yet, but it will be open. In parallel to this, you might be aware that there's ongoing the first edition of the new European BAUHAUS prizes that will reward inspiring examples, and they will be awarded in the end of the summer, together with the end of this so-called design phase. So the next phase will be to set up the 5 pilots that will be selected, and this will be a delivery phase focused on these 5 pilots. And then in the end, it is the dissemination phase, which, as we all know, it was about sharing the knowledge and what we have learned between not just practitioners, but all the community, and to understand what we can learn from those experiences and what we can actually replicate in different regions of Europe. Now, of course, there are already some concrete actions that have been identified in this umbrella, as I told you. Again, because the new European BAUHAUS, it is an umbrella initiative. It is not a mission per se. It can be integrated in different programs across Horizon Europe. This means that across Horizon Europe, there will be specific calls within the new European BAUHAUS. The first one is this one I mentioned, to identify the pilots and to identify these pilot regions which could become examples of this movement that can be then accelerated, and this will be open today. In addition, there will be within the mission, there will be another call still this year with a total budget of 25 million to support the deployment of demonstrations. These are the 2 calls that will open this year. More calls will open this year. As I mentioned, this is spread across the different missions and different clusters of the Horizon Europe. So accordingly, we have it spread in the missions, as I showed you, and also in the clusters. There will be still 2 more calls this year in cluster 4. The others are in the next year. Again, they are in order to fulfill these goals of putting together technology, science, and arts and humanities to address specific challenges. In this case, for instance, of the one that is opening today, it's in the twins transition. So digital issues that relate to buildings and infrastructures. So again, this is the interaction between the digital and the architecture. And another one opening this year on social and affordable housing demonstrator. So these are calls within the umbrella of the new European BAUHAUS that will be spread, as I mentioned, within the Horizon Europe. In clusters 5 and 6, there are also calls opening this year, only one this year and the other ones next year. they will be announced in the traditional, in the other calls. What I'm not completely sure if they are clearly marked as part of the new European BAUHAUS, but they will probably be announced also in the new European BAUHAUS website, which, as I mentioned, you can visit. But these are specific calls. Now, this is, of course, an opportunity to bring together the different players and address these challenges. As I told you, we are following and supporting organizations and researchers that are willing and hopefully to connect to and apply to the new European BAUHAUS. So feel free to send me an email if you have questions. We have been doing, as we do with other programs and with all programs, we have been doing targeted sessions together with the support of particularly of the cultural Minister of Culture, to precisely make this matchmaking between cultural agents and science providers. So let me know if you need any help from us to be able to take part of this movement. But you have to consider that this is the mindset of the movement. This issue of integration that Lars mentioned, and putting people together to address the topics that are aligned with the Green Deal in an inclusive and sustainable and beautiful manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joana, for the insightful and comprehensive overview of all the opportunities laying out there. And as we move on now to the roundtables discussions, we invite you to go to the tab Stages on your left on your screen and visit the parallel rooms, and then join us again here in the main stage in about 1 hour. Thank you and enjoy your sessions.
Now you can start.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the roundtable called Materials and Design for Circularity, as part of the BAUHAUS of Circularity initiative organized by the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory. I'm José Pedro Sousa. I'm a professor at the School of Architecture in the University of Porto, and also a member of the high-level roundtable of the European BAUHAUS. And I'm very pleased to be here as a moderator of this session. Let me just make a very quick introduction. We today, as it was said in the introduction of this event, we are facing challenges of an unprecedented complexity and scale. They are much related with climate change, which represents as a global threat the existence of all human beings without exception. And furthermore, its interconnection with other problems such as economic, demographic, or health ones, like the current COVID-19 pandemic, is drawing a kind of a perfect storm. So to face these threats requires a global and coordinated action from superior authorities, and the European Commission reacted with the Green Deal, aiming at achieving the climate neutrality by 2050. To make this project more than an economic and environmental one, the European Bauhaus was conceived to add this cultural dimension to this transition, which should be made with the help and the participation of everyone from any country and any discipline. So here we are in another European Bauhaus co-design event, this time promoted by the Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory, dedicated to the topic of Bauhaus of circularity. And I'm very happy to be the moderator of this roundtable for two reasons. On the one hand, because of the topic, materials and design for circularity, which is a crucial one, because we have reached a point when the human consumption of natural resources and the impact of nature's delicate ecological systems are out of balance when considering the actual capacity of the Earth. So this is a very important topic for this change. And on the other hand, I'm very pleased to be here because of the fantastic panel of experts that are with me, who crosses different knowledges and also different scales of intervention, as we will see. And for this discussion, we'll have around 16 minutes, with the last 10 dedicated to questions and answers from the audience. So those that are following us, please don't hesitate to launch the questions, I believe through opens. They will reach me and I will try to address some of them in the remaining time. So to start and to break a little bit the ice, I will quickly go through the presenters, the experts that are here with me, and ask for a quick self-presentation. And I will follow the order that was announced in the event. So I'll start with to welcome Claudia Pasquero. Hi, Claudia, welcome here. Claudia is based in London and is the co-founder of the Ecological Studio. That is a renowned practice and award-winning practice that has been developing cutting-edge work since 2006, I believe. So Claudia, please, can you quickly, shortly introduce yourself? What are you doing now?
So I didn't prepare a presentation. I understood I was supposed to just introduce myself. So
exactly.
I'm director and co-founder of Ecology Studio. Ecology Studio is a design innovation company integrating biotechnology and artificial intelligence in the built environment to contribute to issue of climate change through urban design and redesigning cities. I'm also a professor of landscape architecture in Innsbruck University, as well as a senior lecturer at the Bartlett UCL, where I direct the Urban Morphogenesis Lab. Through Ecology Studio, we have recently completed two projects. One dealing with the kids and air pollution in Warsaw, with a playground that integrates microalgae technology in cleaning the air. Warsaw is one of the most polluted city in Europe, and that's why we partner with GSK to develop a playground there that is able to clean the air for kids breathing. We also recently worked with the food industry and developed a set of projects about food production can be integrated in the built environment. And the case studies of these, in which we are partnering also with Swarovski in the creation of photobioreactor, as well as glassware for the consumption of high protein food, and future food is presented at the Venice Biennale. So I think this gives a bit of a summary of recent projects and what we do.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Now I'll welcome Teresa Calix. She is a professor at the School of Architecture and also is leading an initiative called the NEB Goes South. Teresa, can you please let us know a little bit about what you're doing at the school and about this initiative too?
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess José Pedro already said everything that I was going to tell you. So I'm an architect and I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Architecture of the University of Porto, where I coordinate the research profiles to the dynamics and urban forms of the PhD program in architecture and the urban design studio of the integrated master in architecture. I also collaborate in the urban project studio of the master in spatial planning and urban project in collaboration with the Faculty of Engineering. However, as José Pedro was saying, I believe I was invited to this session because I'm presently coordinating the NEVGO South initiative, which brings together 6 universities from the south of Europe in a platform created to discuss this challenge that was launched by the European Bauhaus. So I think it's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Finally, I welcome Begonha Espinha. We are going now to a different discipline. Begonha Espinha is the group leader of water quality at the INL, and you are also a biologist, I think. So could you please let us know a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, of course. First, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Yes, I'm a researcher at INL. I'm leading a group in water quality, as Pedro very well said. And I'm a biologist. And it could surprise some people to find a specific biologist in nanotechnology, but in fact, it's a very interdisciplinary area. And I've been working during the last 9 years in applications of nanotechnology, but as well implications and try to minimize the risks for environment of the use of nanotechnology. So in our group, we have 3 major research areas. One is specifically devoted to developing monitoring systems. So I think this is partially addressing part of the topic of today of integrating smart in materials. So these systems for monitoring is mainly for water contaminants in our case. Then we have a second research line where we develop materials to purify water, to remove contaminants mainly, or to have surfaces that could avoid or prevent the formation of biofilms. That could be as well one topic that is well integrated in the topic of today. And the last line is related with eco-nanosafety. So we evaluate the risks or the potential risks that could imply the use of nanomaterials in products, and above all with the perspective of trying to make them not a risk. So to design them from the beginning to make them not a risk. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Very good, Begonha. Thank you very much. So as you can see, we are here addressing all scales, from the nano to the city scale. And this is very important because this change towards the circular economy needs to really happen and work effectively at all scales. So to start our discussion, I think we are a small round table. So if you at any moment any of you want to jump in to address some issue or to comment on something that is being said, so please, I think we can do it very nicely. But I can't resist to start this discussion with a more general question related with the European Bauhaus, because it is in the scope that we are approaching this topic of circularity. And many people see the original Bauhaus in different ways, some as an inspiration and others as a legacy that eventually have to change some things. So I'd like to know a little bit about how do you see this the original Bauhaus as a source of motivation for the current European Bauhaus initiative. How do you see that?
Well, I see the European Bauhaus initiative as really important because I believe that in terms of climate change, it is now a moment in which design need to have an agency. In a way, we have technology, biotechnology, to work with the planet and the resources of the planet. But the problem, the biggest problem we have at the moment, in my opinion, is a problem of integration. So the question is, we are in time of climate change, but if you think about the change is one of the main characteristics of our planet. We change all the time. We can't stop change. What we can do through design is eventually to be able to reconnect with change, understand change, and establish positive dynamic. And in these visual languages and design has an incredible role in working as interface between the end user and the environmental parameters. So in the sense, you know, the Bauhaus and all the modern movement was about integrating technology into architecture, reconnecting social issue with architectural issue. On the same way, I think the new Bauhaus should reconnect architecture with political, social, and ecological issue. Maybe proposing a radically different paradigm. So it's not about zoning anymore. It's not about the white surface as the paradigm of beauty, but rather is about integrating multiple programs, reintegrating production in the city, overcoming the issue that zoning is actually creating, and eventually proposing an aesthetic where bacteria, microorganisms become part of the discourse. And we are able to reconnect with them because we have a direct contact with them every day. So I think that's about creating, in a way, a totally different paradigm aesthetically and design-wise than the role the original Bauhaus had. But it's important to retain the role and to affirm the importance that architecture can have and visual languages can have in redirecting the current disrupted ecologies of climate change.
Very good. So we can have a similar positive ambitions towards our society and our world, but actually the way to do might be very different than it was done 100 years ago. So Teresa, do you follow this way?
Yes, I think I agree. I was thinking that design and aesthetics became accessible and affordable for everyone through the original Bauhaus. So taking advantage of the opportunities of its time, Bauhaus generalized the value previously accessible only to a few. So I would say that well-designed products and architectural spaces for all and cities for all mark the change of an era. And it's such a kind of change that we need now, associating the new imperatives of sustainability to aesthetics, equity, and inclusion. So I think that's the inspiration of the original Bauhaus, how to do it in integrating now these new challenges.
Very good. The original Bauhaus, I think, was not working at such a smaller scale as we can now work nowadays. So Begoña, how do you see this inspiration?
Well, I don't come from a field where I can talk very freely about the initial Bauhaus movement, but I have in my mind the impression that if one word will stick to a scientist's mind regarding this movement will be functionality. So, and this is because of the pragmatism. So in my mind, this is kept during this new evolved, let's say, Bauhaus, the idea of functionality, but evolving in the terms of functionality, because now we need extended functionalities, not only for the imperative, immediate functionality, but as well along the life cycle of the material or the building, or because we need to think about what is going to happen with it under a system or a condition that is going to change, as Claudia was commenting before with climate change. So in terms of nanoscale, one of the biggest advantages that we can think about of integrating in Bauhaus, new Bauhaus era, let's say, is, I think, multifunctionality. It's something that nanomaterials are very good at.
Very good. I think with your answer, you immediately started to address my next question, and maybe we could continue. I could continue with you to make this more dynamic. So I was thinking, because all of you, let's say, are operating at, I would say, at different scales, although there are, of course, overlaps. But you just mentioned a very interesting concept, this idea of extended functionalities, multifunctionalities, as if the current material condition would not be enough to address the challenges that we have. So what do you think is not, let's say, could be improved in your area of expertise regarding this need to change towards a circularity?
Well, in our particular area of interest, that is in nanoscale, nanomaterials, there are several drawbacks that need to be addressed in order to integrate in final products. One is related with the scarce information regarding the full life cycle of the materials. So this is something that is in development and is being considered even more and more during the last decades. But it is not fully addressed for all the products. And the end of life is one of the questions here. So how to design materials that will resist in a good way until the end of life, and that we can put back again into the system as products. Another thing to address is the necessity of single-use materials. We still rely a little bit too much in single-use materials, as we can see now with plastics and the new regulation by the European Union. But this is not applying only to plastics, it's to almost to all materials. And this happens the same way as well with nanomaterials.
Very, very, very interesting, because we can move from this idea of single-use materials also to single functional buildings, no? And think about the future of the buildings that we are designing today and how we are designing. Maybe I will go to Claudia again to pick in this idea
from specialization to differentiation and integration. The question, I think the major obstacle, for example, at the scale in which we are working, which is the integration, for example, of bacteria and microalgae, I think that is completely possible at the moment, viable. We have developed, for example, last year during the lockdown, the biobombola, which is a non-photobioreactor. We developed it with the kids. The kids use it regularly. They are able to harvest the food, to use the biomass that remains. So it's something that a kid can do effectively. So the technology is there, the design is there. The main issue that we are facing, I think, is the way product and architectural system are delivered and product are distributed. So we are used to products that are off the shelf, switch on, switch off. You don't interact with the process. You are not able to customize it as end user. The same is for architecture. It's a full package. You need to have a certain checklist of requirement and durability that are very rigid. And so all these requirements push the industry towards mass production, which is still a product, a system of production of the first industrial revolution. We cannot move to the fourth industrial revolution if we don't change mode of production. And there is a certain range of material, bioplastic, microalgae, and other that are viable to be integrated in architecture now, not even tomorrow. The problem of integration comes from really the system that distribute and construct architecture at the moment. That is the main obstacle that we are facing. So most of the innovation that we develop are currently integrated in a project that we develop with the corporate system, one-off project, design innovation project, but it's much more difficult to integrate it in a wider manner because of the way the construction industry is currently working. So it's not a technical or design problem, it's rather a systemic problem, I think.
Very good. Let's move to Teresa. Teresa, do you have any comment regarding the scale of the cities?
Yeah. Yes, in fact, I think if we consider the scale of the city, the problem must be addressed even before thinking about the materials. So new structures and infrastructures always lead to the increased load and the growing consumption. And that's why they will predictably be associated with the increase on the pressure on natural resources. However, the circular economy in cities and regions is expected to reduce negative impacts on the environment through pollution decrease, increased share of renewable energy, and reduction of raw materials, water, land, and energy consumption, while potentially increasing resilience. So I think the use of materials that contribute to the reduction of negative impacts on the environment is fundamental. This, I believe it's the first issue that should be addressed, but assuming that this first issue needs to be considered in the first place, I will, as an example, focus particularly on public space design and materials, since I think it's in this framework that the leading and exemplary role of the public institutions can be perceived. So I would say the key when looking at public spaces, for instance, is to create and implement solutions that use permeable materials that respond effectively to the demands of a more permeable public space, like walkable materials that do not retain water and, on the contrary, allow its absorption into the soil, sidewalks, bicycle paths, and even car lanes should be more permeable by reducing these impermeable surfaces without loss of functionality. I think this could be a challenge that could increase rainwater infiltration, and by this way the urban water cycle could be really improved. So I think this could be something that it's not really working well, and where the use of materials might make a difference.
Very good. So continuing with your reasoning, how do you think should be the drivers to assist this change at that scale? It's technology, it's education, it's the public institutions or the authorities. What do you think?
Well, I think, of course, one of the major drivers is what we could improve in the environmental field. But, of course, institutional answer and, above all, economy, I believe it might be the major drivers for transitioning. Probably the last one, economy, or the idea that we could attribute a value, like somehow which could be real estate value or the monetization of environmental gains. I believe that could be a way to guarantee the implementation of innovations to reach full circularity. I would say that, for instance, the use of materials that contribute to the reduction of negative impacts on the environment, like those that contribute to the reduction of impermeable areas, like I was mentioning, or the increase of infiltration areas in new constructions, could be considered in the reduction of municipal fees, for instance, and that I'm sure it would make a difference and would help us to reach full circularity faster.
Very good. Claudia, one of the very interesting things on your work is actually that your studio work with biomaterials, which in the end, let's say, they can be returned to the environment without prejudice. No, they are not these technical materials that we need to find a way to integrate in the circular in a new life cycle again. Can you tell us what could be the promoters of a more higher adoption of these biomaterials and biostrategies in architecture?
Well, there is a higher level of adoption already, but I think a shift need to happen, and is also related to the question Teresa was answering to. For me, a shift need to happen at the political level, in which decisions related to ecology are taken on a qualitative manner rather than in a quantitative one. Meaning targets need to be set also in a qualitative level. And actually design, aesthetic, and beauty need to enter the conversation as a very important language to be able to talk about ecological parameter. If you look at natural system, aesthetic and beauty in biomaterial is an expression of their ecological performance. And in pre-industrial society has always been a measure of how we are able to understand the environment that surrounds us, the clouds, the material that we recycle. So it's important to be able to develop this material language, this interaction with material that change, that are not static, to be able to interact locally in order to change the condition globally. So a form of bottom-up urbanism, we should call it, that doesn't start simply from social engagement, but starts from biosocial engagement, meaning the engagement of the human with the non-human, the engagement of the human with the material. But the only way in which this could happen is also at a political level, design would acquire a different relevance. And we could start, mapping flow ecology through visual map, visual information that are enabling a wider number of people to understand the processes. And once they are understood at a deeper level, actually interact with them and change them. If we don't harvest the collective intelligence of the planet, we are not able to face this issue. That's my opinion.
Very, very good. So, and you, Begoña, in your field, let's say, what are the conditions that you feel that could help and boost the developments at that scale, and then inspire also and inform other practices that work at higher scales? Could you tell us a little?
Well, not specifically in my field, but one of the drivers for our objectives in research inside the European Union during the last years are around the Green Deal that was signed some years ago, and that all the Horizon Europe is around. So one of the biggest drivers, I think, for Europe is this deal is a commitment. So it's not only that it has to be profitable to gain circularity, but we need to make it sustainable economically, but it's a must. It's something that we need to do, and this was signed as a deal. So I think that this definitely is one of the drivers. And the other driver that I see is human health and well-being, because this is not only regarding safetiness. Safetiness is very important, and human health in the understanding of disease prevention, but as well considering that we are living in an aging society, and that well-being is very much related with nature, and we know that. This could be a very good driver for the new design of the materials, buildings, and surroundings, I think.
Thank you, Begoña. Maybe going to Claudia. Claudia, one of the things that looks like it's changing is our perception about nature, or our respect regarding nature. And usually architects tend to think that we just deliver a building and we place it on Earth and that's it. But today, as Begoña was also stressing a lot, this idea of the life cycle, we have to think in a totally different relation with nature. So looking to your work, nature is much more than let's say the place where we set our buildings. No, it's also an inspiration. Much more than that, it also looks like it's also the material to think and design our buildings. Could you tell us a little bit about the role of nature in your work?
I like to talk about the role of bioorganism more than nature, because in terms of the definition of nature, in terms of cultural reference, I share the point of view, not on everything, but on this, with Slavoj Žižek on the fact that nature does not exist. Better, the nature as a paradigm of untouched natural system that have not interacted with human is not the nature we interact with. We interact with biological system, mineral system, and artificial system. So the artificial and the natural are so interwoven that it's difficult to depict what is natural and what is not. The question is, can we deal with dynamical system? Can we integrate in the back in the paradigm of aesthetic and architecture what is called the dark side of ecology? We cannot regreen the planet. We cannot bring back a slider of a temporary perturbed biosphere. We are in a changed planet. And we need to accept that and also embrace what they call waste and pollutants, which are not waste and pollutant per se. Elements that we cannot breathe are nutrients for the microalgae. So the interest, for example, of working with nature-based solution is that you are not cleaning the air. You are creating an alliances with other microorganisms that are able to feed on what you actually don't feed. So it's a question of reading opportunity, reading flow, and creating alliances with the non-human. So the point of view that we have on nature is to try and take also in design a non-anthropocentric point of view, whereas nature does not exist, exists just a planet that is continuously changing. And in order to deal with this changing, we need to read them. We need to read them dynamically. We need to interact with that and create alliances with other organisms that can contribute to the planet in a way that we cannot. So that's our point of view on the subject.
Very interesting. We need a more than human point of view regarding our actions in our planet.
And less than human defense.
Exactly. What about the city scale, Teresa? Because we have more than half of the population living in cities today, and this tends to increase. So
yeah, but I totally agree with what Claudia just said. I really believe that, well, it's not really nature, but natural areas must be seen in a systemic way. Of course, also as an inspiration of this living complexity that can play a fundamental role in the requalification of urban spaces. I think the nature-based solutions are just this way, as Claudia was saying, of finding the better alliances in order to respond to today's urban challenges. For instance, the blue and green lines, as we call them in a simplified way, or the tree as an essential bioelement, are fundamental partners for the climate transition. And this idea of recognizing how they work, I believe it's really crucial for the quality of the solutions proposed and for the quality of the future cities.
Very good. And Begoña, your resolution about the idea of the natural or the biological is very different than ours. Could you tell us a little bit on that?
Well, in fact, when we speak about nature-based solutions or nature-inspired solutions, we think about living organisms. In fact, even if, as Claudia pointed out, nature is inorganic as well, but we tend to think in biological organisms. From my field of expertise, of course, we've been seeing nature as a source of products, but this is from ancient times, obviously. In terms of nanoscale, there are many products that we can name that come from nature, such as nanocellulose, that is being integrated more and more in consumer products. But it's not only as products, but we see it as well as inspiration. At nanoscale, there are specific phenomena that happen, such as, and everybody knows about the lotus effect, the lotus leaf effect, that is super hydrophobic, that you can put one drop of water and it will never expand. It stays the same. And this kind of property can be exploited a lot in buildings, and it's been mimicked in other materials to be integrated with an extra functionality of avoiding biofilm formation or biofouling. And there are other examples such as inspiration on some of the structures that make plants photosynthetic. There are a lot of advances nowadays in materials development that try to mimic what happens in these structures, in the chloroplasts, in order to be able to collect energy or transform energy from the sun in chemical energy. So there is a lot of inspiration, and even in the last years, even more and more.
Very good. I can't resist to jump maybe here one question that I had planned here, because when we think about this conception of our actions and of our materials in a full life cycle, it's evident that we need to interact with other disciplines that might help us in conceiving, assessing those interventions. In your field, can you tell us a little bit about the role of interdisciplinarity? How do you work with other disciplines, not just to solve problems, but actually to also to imagine, what could be these future possibilities?
In our case, it's very straightforward. We work in an environment that is interdisciplinary from the beginning. We are dealing with materials at nanoscale, and it's very important to know their properties. To know their properties, we need physicists. In order to formulate these materials, we need chemists. We need to know which is their function and how they are going to behave. And then we need to integrate them in products. So we need engineers as well. So and above all, we need the user, the final customer or the user. So in our case, as we deal with the final application, but from the beginning, from the starting point of the material, we need to integrate the perspective of all the areas. And this is essentially, if we want to plan what is going to happen with the material at the end of the life of the material as well. So its interdisciplinarity is in our nature.
Mm-hmm. And Claudia, in your case, how do you come with the, let's say, to support your work, your ideas? How do you relate to other disciplines in practice?
Well, of course, both in practice and in academia, interdisciplinarity is important, and it's important to structure collaboration with the professional and the researcher working in other disciplines, but with like-minded philosophy and approach to the world. In my opinion, it's also important in education to underline two other parameters. One is that maybe the boundary between discipline could be less rigid than the one that they have been in the last 100, 200 years. Again, here I'm referring to, pre-Renaissance, more the pre-industrial, where the discipline, or if you take as example a figure like Leonardo, which was not uncommon at the time, will be able to apply visual languages to a scientific problem and move from logical analysis, algorithmic information to visual one. So in my opinion, it's important to have it's very important to have an interdisciplinary team you work with, but it's always also important for the single individual to acquire a certain degree of knowledge that goes beyond the rigid boundary of its own discipline. This is because we need to facilitate a higher degree of integration between disciplines. For example, certain biological experiment or experimentation, they are set up probably in a different way if the question is design-oriented, society-oriented, city-oriented, or if the question has got a pure target related to a biomaterial. So the scale is probably also very different. So it's important that the different disciplines collaborate, but also appropriate part of the knowledge of the other discipline. The same that happens in a conversation, I would say. All the time you conversate with, entailing a conversation with somebody, you somehow acquire or learn something from the other person or the other being. So I think that is important also in discipline to keep the boundary less rigid and form professional figures that are able to span across multiple disciplines and therefore collaborate in a deeper manner with other disciplines.
Very good. Finally, just Teresa, what about your experience and your vision also about the city planning maybe?
Well, I think, in city planning, this interdisciplinarity has been a way of doing it. But now I think it's quite clear that the problems are very complex and solutions cannot be seen in a simplified way, nor limited to a knowledge area. So I think that interdisciplinarity is essential to promote advances in new materials and best practices. Like, for instance, Begoña was saying, the relationship, it is clear that relationship between architecture and the arts in general, with biology or chemistry, as well as the integration with landscape design, engineering, health sciences, among many others, it seems crucial for future development. I think, it's really clear that everything is overlapping and we cannot really talk about those rigid limits like Claudia was explaining.
Very, very good, Teresa. Well, we are now, let's say, reaching towards the end of this roundtable. We will have some time also to accept here one or two questions from the audience, but I can't resist in asking one more question to you, which is related with education, because this must be a cultural change, and the best way to promote this change is through education, it looks like. So in your fields, in your scales, how do you see the role of education, how it can foster the trends and the concepts that you think are interesting to support this change? I could say maybe, Teresa, maybe you can continue with you.
Okay, so I really believe that the role, the education has an important role to promote this needed cultural transition, and above all, I believe in the younger generation, and in its willingness to learn and reverse the effects of the past, contributing to a climate-neutral Europe. That is my experience. It's my experience with my students that I would like to share with you. How much I have learned with them, because they really establish new priorities in the development of the territory. And therefore, even if our generation may be somehow outdated or be too conservative, I am sure that the necessary change will be made through these younger people. And of course, if we have this, if we deal with this challenge, that we should also orientate them in order that they believe that these are a path to go through.
Very good. Claudia, you have a diverse and long experience in education in different institutions in Europe and also beyond Europe. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that education can face to address these concerns and promote circularity?
Well, one of the main challenges I found is with addressing younger students, I have to say, that arrive to university with a very somehow sometimes very closed and preconceived idea of architecture, that in a way that pictures what architecture is for society, that we should try and somehow change the image of architecture or what architecture can deliver. It's not making a biotechnology prettier per se, but it really can contribute to the way to change in the way we live and the way we approach the planet. So one of the main challenges is usually addressing, in my opinion, the younger student. One of the opportunity is to try and really discuss with a large number of students how we can change the discipline, how we can, each of them can effectively contribute on its own way in promoting an architecture that contribute to the current ecological crisis rather than simply contributing to the construction industry. I think that is the main effort that we are trying to make, and also on understanding how research connect to practice. So how can we develop a practice-based research and a teaching that is much more connected to the practice and to what happened outside, so that influence it, but also transform it, and they can transform each other.
Very good. And finally, Begonha, what about in the nano field? How do you see the challenges in education in this matter?
Well, in general, in science, not only in nanofield, we see that at earlier stage, the children are really permeable. So they are able to capture very well the concepts, even very complex concepts, such as could be nanoscale or nanotechnology. And the fact of incorporating this through experience, through making things with the hands and seeing them and approaching to instruments that are really complex, it's a very good way, and it's being reinforced more and more in the primary education. What I think that it could be a good next step is related with this movement of merging very different disciplines that we want to merge, in fact, in this kind of programs, such as art and science. So in higher degrees, how interesting will be to have specific programs in higher education where we have already this merging, because we see that it's very important to have not only a civil engineer, but a civil engineer with more concepts in ecology, for instance, or in biology directly, or in architecture. So this concept of not having only the pure discipline degrees, but some merged degrees, I think that it could help a lot in understanding each other and the different sciences.
Very, very good. Thank you. So now we are reaching to the end. So we have here one or two questions from the audience. I will read them so we can try to address them. The first question is related to the building construction sector, which is pointed out as a very traditional one and with difficulties to reach or to achieve the circularity that we need. And the question is regarding the kind of innovations that we need to find or develop in order to assist the building construction sector to achieve this the circularity that we need. Any of you as a comment on that? We already touched a little bit some of these top points that could.
Well, the fact is that the construction industry is not necessarily coincidental with architecture at the moment. It's like a system on its own. So I would say the first step is to have a higher influence of the architectural discipline on the construction system. And the second step, in my opinion, would be to transform the way we evaluate the construction system, the parameter, and so to be able to integrate materials that are more temporary, that are more ephemeral, and also practice that allow us to interact more with the construction. So in a way, it's not a question of the building and the landscape, but it's a question of building and landscape being integrated in one single element. So there will be always element the end user or a group of end user will need to take care of in the building, and they potentially will be element of the construction that will change continuously, even element on bioplastic that can be remelted every 3 years. But then there will be other elements that are more static and constitute the infrastructure. So I think to be able to introduce what we can call circularity in the built environment, we need a higher level of integration of the landscape, which is something that, for example, the all photosynthetica curtain and system is working on, but there are, of course, other elements. But is this level of integration that is essential and would also change the way we think about maintenance, maybe as gardening or as interaction, as everyday practice.
Very good.
So I might add something on that because, I agree with what Claudia was explaining. And of course, when you asked us about what would be the drivers, when I was talking about the economy and the monetization of environmental gains, I think I was, of course, thinking of the traditional sector of construction, because it's not easy some of the times to make sure that the message is clear. So sometimes you have to create a way to improve transformations or improve differences in the way it works. And that's why I was talking about how the monetization of these environmental gains could be important to change this traditional sector that could be a bit static or too related with some particular ways of doing.
And Begoña, is it the extended functionalities of matter one of these innovations that we also need to explore?
Yes, this was going to be one of my comments. Well, in the general materials for construction, the classical ones, there are already some innovations that include the participation of nanomaterials that improve the performance and the durability of the materials, such as the case of some encapsulations inside the concrete that performs self-healing, and this increases the durability of the buildings. There are some other functionalities, such as the use of very novel materials, such as graphene, where you can have not only the resistance or scratch resistance in the performance of the products used in construction, but as well the conductivity that allow to integrate electronics with the material itself. And this goes with the concept of a smart city and a smart building and the Internet of Things, having information of what's happening in the buildings as well. I know of other projects that are trying as well to reduce materials from construction, but this has not specific relationship with nanomaterials. But I can think of other possibilities, such as the inclusion on coatings for avoiding the formation of biofilms. This increases well durability of materials.
Thank you, Begoña. Well, I'm afraid to say that we just reached the end of this roundtable. We don't have more time to address other questions, so I'm very sorry for that. I would like to thank you a lot to Claudia, Teresa, and Begoña for sharing with us your thoughts and your ideas on the topic, and looking forward to meet you in another way in the future. Thank you very much, and maybe
Thank you. A pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to the main stage of this online session dedicated to the Bauhaus of Circularity. And after this full hour of exciting ideas and interaction, I now welcome back Professor Lars Montelius to wrap up the discussion. And from my side, thank you very much for joining this session and hope to see you all very soon.
Thanks a lot. And now I just would like to say some final words about these very interesting discussions. I've been hopping between the two hop-in platforms, listening here and there. And I think the discussions has gone on very, very, very well. And I would say the kind of impression now, thinking in the future, we have the climate changes here. We have the Green Deal, which is a big opportunity in European Commission and European Union, and all for the member states to actually do something that is really meaningful. And we have now the means to be able to do that. And the meaningfulness will help us all to really put forward what is the best out there in society. And we should do it in an inclusive perspective by introducing it to, let's call it, to our communities, to work through our communities and securing that everyone has a benefit of this. So it's not so much about develop technologies that could, only incrementally have an effect. It's more about really making something very big and very important out there. And I would say you can think about, in order to get the involvement or in order to have people involved, is the possibility to do active choices. So one thing that I think is very important for the future is this kind of traceable sustainability. So that means when a consumer makes the choice whether they should buy A or B product, if they can see on the label or through some other kind of means, QR codes or whatever, which one is the best one from a sustainability point of view, they can make a smart choice. They can make the choice of being informed. So they can take what is the best one. And by this, having this kind of traceable sustainability, this could be a real good thing for the European Union to work on, because that could be the competitive edge in Europe to kind of develop this, let's call it this certification or standardization or standard of the different goods that we will produce. And that could be everything from houses to toys for kids, to things for our offices, etc., for our clothes, whatever. And I think this notion of the traceability of the sustainability, or the cyclability, if you like, is a key that could be very, very important. And I think the kind of concepts as being framed now in this Bauhaus is a really good concept in order to make these test beds where things can be tested, where people can be involved and making their opinion heard and the voices heard in order to secure that we're doing the right development that will lead to, in the end, the European prosperity. So with these words, I hope you all got very engaged now in the Bauhaus initiative. And as you heard from Joana before, there are possibilities to get engaged and become a member of this initiative and be a spokesperson for this initiative, etc. And also a lot of funding opportunities, but it's not about the funding per se. It's really about what we would like to achieve. And then there is funding that can sustain that, of course. So with all those words, thank you once again for being with us this afternoon, and see you soon again. Thank you.